Hello, today we are going to talk about 3D printing. And many of my students have asked me what 3D printing is and what it's used for, and just have a lot of questions about it. What makes it important, and is it a thing of the gods? Is it this magic, mind-blowing thing that pretty much just comes about, or do you just press a button and this 3D printed little thing just shows up? No, it requires, there's a lot behind 3D printing, a lot of programming, a lot of technology, but in essence, you can almost do exactly that once you know what you're doing. In the background there, this is an Ultimaker 3D printer. I will show you some 3D printing later. I'll add it to this video at the end. And this printer has a bed size about this big, and a square, and you have a lot of options with what you do. But first off, I'm going to talk about what materials I'm using in my 3D printer right now. So this is a roll that goes on the back. And this roll is, this is PLA, which is plastic. And so it comes off of a roll like this. And it comes into the machine through these tubes up here on the top of the machine. It comes with a machine and it pushes up the tube and it comes into a core. And the core it heats up and then it pushes it through a tiny little thing. And so this material is plastic. There's different types of plastic, carbon fiber, things like that. But I use PLA because it's cost effective, and it has a lower melting point, which means it prints a bit easier. And and so when you're doing a 3D model, sometimes when you have something, say like this, and you have an area in here that's hanging in the air, when it comes in and it prints, some of this stuff needs support. So you can either use the same material as this, but then you got to break it out, and it kind of makes your 3D model not look that great at the end. But see how nice and clean this one is? I used this. This is called PVA. So PVA is the same type of material. My printer's dual extrusion, so you'll notice up here there's a second tube. This is the second roll that would go on it. If you wanted to use a material like this, and this is like a transparent, it's the same as this. It's the same as what's in this, except it's just in a harder form. So it melts, and then when you're done, you just put it in water, and this stuff just melts away. It's almost like magic. It's almost like this magic. And the nice thing is that you get a really beautiful, clean model when you're done. And it looks quite nice. So now I want to talk about what you can do with 3D printing. And I'm of three minds when it comes to 3D printing. Three minds. One thing is you can print things that are prototypes, which means, say you have a design. Like my son and I used to play darts when we were young, and I always liked ninjas. So and he did too, and ninja movies. So I designed this in part, and these points I got on the internet. They're just dart points for darts, and this is so we can play darts with a ninja star. And it took me many prototypes to get this done, and they kept breaking right here, and I had to fix it. It took me about 3 or 4, but it allowed me to play with different designs. And I got this off of a site called Thingiverse or My Mini Factory. Those are two websites. I'm going to say those again. Thingiverse and My Mini Factory are two sites where you can get free 3D models. And so I took one, and then I just cut these off and made it into my own thing. And so prototyping is one. Another one is props. So let's say you like video games or you like movies. Then you could actually print. This is a game. There's a game called Mass Effect, and this is a laser pistol from Mass Effect. It's not real. It's just made of plastic, but it looks pretty real, doesn't it? And this is all painted, primed and painted, but even this little piece, I designed this little piece for the bottom, and so this just sits in here like this. Usually works, just like that, and then it holds it and it stands up. So there's many uses. You can make practical things. You can make, you can prototype things, and something else you can do is you can just, you can make things off the internet that you want. Like, say you see something that is already made, there might be a 3D model. Like my saw broke, one of the places where the cords went broke, and so I remade the piece. So there's something called a digital micrometer. So if you ever want to, and there's some of my students would really, I know Dylan would really like this. This is a digital micrometer. So you see how it has a measurement on there? So if I wanted to measure something that is already made, I just put this on like this, and it tells me exactly what the distance is. Or if you want to measure the inside of something, it's got this, and so you would just put that, like let's say I wanted to measure the inside of the hole on the front of this thing, and I just pull that to when it's like this, and then I know the exact dimension of the inside of that hole. So when you're making something and you want to 3D model it, this is a really nice tool to have. I like this one because it's digital. I have another one that is not digital, and each is just as good. It's just easier to read this one to the 0.millimeter. Now, let's talk about how a 3D printer prints. So there's different ones. Mine is the PLA one. And then there's also ones that are resin, and resin printers print with liquid, and it just uses lasers and it comes up. But we're going to talk, there's different ones, but let's talk about this one today. So what happens when you 3D print? This is called benchy. This is, and the reason they call them benchy, like benchy the boat, is it's something you 3D print so you can see how good a detail you can do with your 3D printer. Now, everyone knows, or you should know, how much a millimeter is. A millimeter is very small. The 3D printer prints in layers. So imagine like layers of paper together. It comes down and the bed is here, and then it prints the one layer, and then the bed moves down a little bit. It prints the next layer. It moves down a little bit. It prints the next layer. So it did this layer by layer by layer by layer by layer till it gets to the top. And when it does that, once it's done, you have this, and you can see how you can see you might be able to see some of the lines. Sorry, it's hard for you to see here, but you can see that it's little lines that make this up. Now, on this 3D printer, this one, the Ultimaker 3, you can actually choose up to 0.06 millimeter layer heights, which means it's incredibly detailed. And I mean, if you're printing something that's a square, it doesn't really matter because it's just going straight up. So you're not really going to see a noticeable difference. But when you have a curve like this, as you can see, it's really nice and clean. If I did like a 2 millimeter or a 0.2 millimeter or a 0.5 millimeter, then you would have steps like this as it goes up. And then you don't get as much detail as you want. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some video. I'm going to show you a little bit of video of the 3D printer working so you have a better understanding of how it does this. And then I'll come back and I'll show you some more stuff after. Thanks. This is my 3D printer. On the front of the 3D printer, it shows you the name of the thing that it's printing, and it connects Wi-Fi to my computer through my network. And what I'm printing right now is a holder for a cell phone, and it'll hold it upright, vertical or horizontal. And as you can see, it's going layer by layer, 0.15, that's 0.15 millimeters for each layer. And as it goes, it just builds and builds. It starts at the bottom, and if you notice at the bottom, this material right here, this lighter material, that is PVA, just like your PVA glue. And I also use PVA glue here to stick it down so it sticks. And it's actually printing with PLA, which is like a softer melting point plastic. And it just builds it layer by layer by layer. And this head right here, you can see that the head has these two little lights. Those are the cores, and it's pushing through the core, it's getting heated, and then underneath the plastic comes out and it goes to a very specific location. This is all math, and it knows its certain X, Y coordinate and Z as it moves the bed up and down. The head stays on the same axis, this head here, and this plate, this build plate, moves up and down as it's printed. So if you look on the back here, these are the spools. This is your plastic, this is your PVA, and they go through this tube here, and the tube comes down and goes in. And that is my 3D printer. And it's made by Ultimaker, and it is a wonderful 3D printer. And I am not dissatisfied in the least after getting it. And you can do a lot of different things with the 3D printer. Have a nice day. Now that the 3D print is done, the machine comes to a stop, and it usually flashes, but I just stopped the flashing. And you can see here, this is the lead in. This is where it squirts a little bit out before it starts. And then it goes all the way around. Then it puts in the second material. Then it starts on the piece. And the piece just pops off. And now you can see that this is a nice phone holder. And it turned out quite well. And I'll put it in here so you can see it in the light a little bit better. But yeah, it turned out quite well. I did it at the higher detail so that it's nicer. And then it just leaves this stuff on here. And I take this off by just washing it. And this stuff usually it peels off not too bad. See, it just comes off. Anyways, yeah, so that's my phone holder that I made for my son. And that's the 3D printer. Now that you've seen how a 3D printer works, I would like to talk about that third one that I kind of really didn't get into. Like, it might be kind of four. Like, if a third one would be like little toys like this, or maybe a little Pokemon guy that you like, or something like that. You could do art. So if you look behind me, here's a painting. Now, that is an airbrush painting done with texture. So I take an airbrush and I spray through something, and I layer it with tape and stuff, and that's how you get these textures all over here. So I was tired of using textures that I would find, or not tired, but I just wanted something a little bit different. So I made, and you can see how there's paint on it because I painted through it. This is a texture I made on the computer, a repeating texture. Here's another one. And here's another one. Like that. And you can see all the paint on it. It just dries, and that's okay. But this is how you can layer texture, and this is how people can get cool effects on their face for photographs too. See if you're a photographer. Wouldn't that be a cool photo? Anyways, so why 3D printing? 3D printing gives you the option to physically manifest the things that you want, of course, to scale. In a reasonable time frame. I mean, and it depends on what you want to do. There was my first thing I ever made on the 3D printer. There's a game called Skyrim, which I really like, and there's an orcish dagger. And so on the computer, I couldn't find it, so I made a 3D model, and then this is what I ended up with. That's a real looking orcish dagger. Now, this involved a little bit more. This isn't the actual 3D print. I made a mold with silicone and then poured this out of solid plastic. Then airbrushed this, added some leather, added some of this fur stuff, and now it's like a real orcish dagger, and I love it. I just have it on my table at home. It's made of plastic though, so it's not really dangerous. See this on the side of the on the side of the Ultimaker, I'm trying to use my finger here, but on the side of the Ultimaker is this symbol. That's their symbol. So I wanted to make a zombie version. So this is a zombie version of the little Ultimaker guy that I keep above my 3D printer just for fun. So there's so many different things you can do with 3D printing. Sometimes, like another thing from Skyrim, I'm just going to grab it here. Again, bear in mind this, when you get done 3D printing, you can glue this stuff together. This is glued together, and it's glued together, and it's airbrushed, and it's painted. So see how that fits really nice? So you can make Halloween props. You can make props for real movies on a 3D printer. I'm just wondering if anybody here has seen a movie called Guardians of the Galaxy. I saw that movie and I really like it, or I really liked it. I still really like it. And so I don't know if you've ever seen the pistols from there. These were done in blue and red. So these are the dual elemental pistols, and I think they look amazing in white. There's something about things in white and the shadows, like Michelangelo's David sculpture. So these are really cool. These are some of my favorite things that I've ever 3D printed. But there's one really special one that I want to show you. Now, there's a game that I like called Fallout, and I always wanted to give myself a challenge. So over a period of 6 weeks, I printed 80 parts at about 16 hours per day, because I didn't want the 3D printer running at night because it would keep me awake. And I mean, it's not too noisy, but it's noisy enough. And so I made a helmet from Fallout. It's the T-54D power helmet. Not like you would know what that is. Some of you might. But it's a really cool helmet, like from this post-apocalyptic wasteland. So I'm going to put this on for you so you can see it. I won't be able to see through it. Actually, I know I'm going to leave that in, but this is actually fully wearable. It's got the hoses and everything. So this took me a really long time to make. I'll put it over here because the lighting's a bit better. But like it took a long time to make, and it's just a matter of painting. So if you're really into stuff like this, you can do so much. You can do so much with it. Something recently, I mean, if you have a creative mind, you can just look at so many applications for 3D printing. It's literally insane, the amount of applications. I am an advocate for the environment. I try to recycle everything I can, and even with the plastic that I use from 3D printing, I keep it and I don't throw it. I'll just throw everything in the garbage. And that's why I use the PLA glue, because the PLA glue just dissolves, and I'm not just having more plastic that I'm throwing away. Now, there's a lot of development in the area, and I thought it was beautiful, like all the trees. So this is something, it's hard to see it, but there we are. So this is a tree. This is at White Rock Beach. This is a tree with looking up, and you see it better. You see it better when you look up close. So it's really interesting with how you can do lithopanes, and lithopanes are something you can do with 3D printing. It's 3D printing a photograph. So I mean, there's so many things you can do with 3D printing. As you might get a hint that I love 3D printing, and I really do. I think 3D printing has so many applications, and you can do so many different things with it. This is another thing. I don't know if any of you played Super Mario. So this is a little thing printed with green. This is actually green and red PLA material, the plastic material. And inside each one of these, it's designed to fit all the Canadian coins. Not pennies, because we don't use pennies anymore, but just to show you. This one, see, nickels fit perfectly inside, just like that. So, and then if you want to organize your coins, it's a little coin organizer. Now I made this on the computer by just making some tubes and stuff like that. And now I'm going to talk about as a human being coming into 3D printing, what can be the pitfalls, or what can be the sort of the humps that you got to get over? So I would say there's three things in 3D printing that are important. Number one is knowing what you want to do. Let's say I wanted to make this and it doesn't exist, and I don't know how to 3D model on the computer, then I'm going to have a problem. I either need to pay someone to do it, or I need to learn how to do software. So I would recommend, if you want to learn how to 3D model, I won't get into 3D modeling in this video, like actually showing anyone how to do it, but there's a software called Tinkercad that you can get, and it is a very good way to start. It's more it's more for doing more squarish kind of things, squares, cylinders, something like that, just your basics of 3D modeling. But I encourage you to start playing with Tinkercad or some type of a 3D modeling program where you can play with 3D objects. And I just think it's a good way to learn the basics. So if I wanted to get this and I couldn't find it on the internet, I would 3D model this on the computer, and then I would print it. And if I didn't want it to be green, then I would paint it. So and something that I didn't talk about yet is, let's see here, when you're making some of this stuff, let's see if you can see on the inside of this mask. It's a little bit hard to see, but there's cut lines. See right here, there's a cut line. So I actually 3D printed this because it was too big to print on my 3D printer, because your bed size where it 3D prints is only a certain size. I printed this in 3 parts or 4 parts, glued it together, and then used a special material to fill, and then I sanded, then I primed it, then I painted it. So if you're going to do something like this, there's a process involved in getting from where you just have an idea in your mind, then getting there. So to quickly go through that again, I have an idea, number one, for something that I want. Number two, I go online to a website like myminifactory.com or thingiverse.com. I look and see if I can find something there like what I want. If I can find it there, I can take that. Then I can either just print that as it is, or I can model it. If I can't find what I want, then I can either go in a software like Maya, like Fusion 360 or Tinkercad. As a student, you can get any Autodesk product for free to use as a student. So I would go on Autodesk's website, and if you have a decent computer, you can try some of these softwares. And I really recommend it because it's very helpful if you want to get from A to C or A to D. And so after you have this object on the computer, then you're able to go into software. I use Cura software. It's C-U-R-A. I'm not sure what version they're at now. Not like that matters. But so once you've 3D modeled it, you export it as an STL file. Now, a lot of 3D software these days will take any type. It'll even bring in an object file. So an STL file is a stereolithography file. Now, imagine that you're looking at, let's look at a basic cube, okay? If you have a basic cube, or let's say you have a ball, think about the outside of the ball. That's all the 3D printer really cares about, is the skin or the outside. So if I wanted to 3D print me, it would just care about what my skin was. Let's pretend I was bald and I didn't have hair. I don't even want to think about that, but that's too funny. But imagine that, and it would just want to print the skin. It doesn't matter what's inside. Inside, it does something that's called an infill. And an infill is just something so it doesn't print everything solid, so it doesn't use a ton of plastic. So, as it's printing these things, it's just worrying about the skin. So as long as your file has a complete skin, it's going to print perfect. So once you've sent this thing to the printer and you pick your parameters, you pick your layer heights, you do all these options. When you get into it, and you 3D print and you finish, let's say I have this and I'm done, you can go to a place like Lordco and you can get a plastic primer. It's called Plasticoat. You spray it with this primer. Now make sure, if you're younger, if you're a student, there's a disclaimer here. Talk to your parents before you do anything, and wear a mask and gloves and some clothes that aren't that great if you're ever going to spray paint something. And if you want to spray paint something like this, you can hang it from a wire on a line, and then it won't be touching anything, and it'll spray paint really nice. So, and once you've primed it, then you can paint it. I mean, you could even hand paint this with acrylic paint. When you're first starting, that's what I'd even suggest, is just paint this with acrylic paint, and just be really light with your brush. Maybe add a little water to your acrylic paint so it goes nicely. And I mean, that's pretty much what 3D printing is. 3D printing is the ability to think about something and then have it in your hand, sometimes in less than 4 hours. I mean, there's little things like, you know where your cord comes out on your iPhone and it sometimes bends and it wrecks? There's a little thing that I made for that you put on there, and it makes it like almost like a cast on your arm if your arm's broken, so that it doesn't bend. And I mean, little things like that, they can print in 5 minutes. Or like little Lego rings, like this little Lego ring with a thing that you can wear Lego that I made for my nephews. I mean, there's so many different things. That's what I have to say about 3D printing. And I hope that I have been able to answer some of your questions when it comes to 3D printing. If you want to get into 3D modeling, again, I say try Tinkercad first. Try some of the other programs out there that are readily available on there, and they're really good for kids to try. And if you ever try something, I recommend, or if you want to make something, do a sketch first. Like plan it out. Get one of these if you can. Sometimes you can get them cheap at places. At places like get them on Amazon or Home Depot or something like that, or maybe not Home Depot, but KMS Tools, things like that. This is one of my favorite tools, and I like working in millimeters. I've always worked in inches in construction and building things, but once you get into a 3D printer, you'll find millimeters very handy, and you'll find all the stuff we're learning in math and geometry and everything. It's so handy in designing things, and you'll get that epiphany where you're like, oh my goodness, these things I've been learning are actually practical, and they're like, and they're amazing. And then you'll realize that you actually do have the power of the gods to manifest things. You'll get to the point sometime, if you're at a school and you have a 3D printer and making things, it'll actually blow your mind because it's just so amazing. Anyways, this year of teaching grade 5 has been probably one of the most amazing years I've ever had in my life. And I hope to see some of you doing some interesting things with 3D printing in the future. Have a great day, and take care.